Well, good morning. Okay, so new video. It's been a little bit since I've posted anything. I've actually made some videos and content, and I am, in each case, I'm like, there's just little bits I want to edit out, and I am still learning basically how to do editing. So that's something that I hope to post some of that content later, especially around Android versus iPhone, or politics, the really fun stuff that everyone just loves to talk about. So that being said, my thoughts this morning are actually on Bluesky. So apparently yesterday Bluesky opened it up, and I actually happened to notice it this morning. I think it must have been on Twitter or X or whatever they would like to call themselves. Honestly, one of the worst rebrandings I think I have seen. It should have just been kept to Twitter. There's no reason to rebrand it X. It's not actually any different. And it is what it is. But anyways, Bluesky though. Let's talk about Bluesky, because I saw it there and I was like, let me race over and sign up, because I'd actually had put in, to get on their wait list. Didn't get an email, that's fine. But I got in, signed up. By the way, it appears to have been a pretty darn good launch. Apparently not flawless. There were a couple times when they had issues. And I forget the number I saw this morning. It was a pretty decently sized number of people who signed up. And apparently very little downtime. And it was sporadic. It wasn't continuous or anything. Sounds like it was a pretty successful launch, to be perfectly honest. Just having gone through a product launch or 2 or 5 myself. Sounds like it was pretty darn successful. But the other thing that's interesting is I'm on it now. I can see, some more of the content. And what's interesting is some of their engineering that's behind it. Why is it not a proper P2P network? Why isn't it exactly federated? Why isn't it exactly this or that? And how it's sort of a little bit of each, but then they're like, this is why. This is why we were looking at this, DHT tables, which are really good at this, and, we don't want lock-in and whatnot, but this, there's a problem with pure federation and, discoverability and connecting users, and I thought, that's actually kind of cool how they engineered this. Like, companies, when they build systems, especially complex systems, and in the end, this is quite a complex system, there's a lot of engineering that goes into it. There's a lot of, what are we trying to do? Okay, we're trying to do X. Cool. Well, what do we need to do X? And at what scale do we need to be able to do X? Oh, we want to be, essentially the next Twitter. Okay, cool. Well, then that's a lot of scale to build. I have built micro social networks. I actually kind of like that term. I might use that. I've built and architected multiple micro social networks. And there's always you have to have that understanding. Well, what is your scale? Not just your scope. Like, what features do you want? How do you want it to work? How do you want signups to work? But also your scale. Do I need to be able to handle 50 signups a day, 500 signups a day, 5,000 signups a day on regular? 50,000 signups a day? 500,000 signups a day? And then how long is that going to go for? Is that a week? Is that a month? How many people are in that kind of community that you're targeting? But for something like these guys, where it's general public, that's huge scale. That is potentially, half of all people on Earth type thing, which is a lot. And then, of course, that there's going to be bots and things like that too. But that requires a lot of engineering and a lot of thought of, if we need to swap this out, if we need to change how we do things, like if we need to change how we do user signups, or if we need to change how the API works, or how API keys work, or how we store user data, or how users discover other users that might be of interest to them, or how the search engine works. If we need to change that out, how easy is that to change? How how much is this a single monolithic block, and how much of this is, and I don't want to use the term per se, microservices, because that's not exactly, microservices can be used as a way to solve that problem, but it's essentially, how do we have multiple interdependent systems that can talk to each other, but we can also swap a component out, so long as it meets certain promises, certain interfaces is what, as a developer, what we would call that. So that if I decide, hey, Elasticsearch was working great before, but now we've written our own, or I wanted to use full text search on a SQL server. Yeah, or, oh, there's a new open search thing, and it's got some really cool new features, and I need us to tweak our API a little bit, or I need us to tweak the integration a little bit, or maybe it's a whole new system. Maybe it's a whole new homegrown, custom-built search engine, and it's written in Golang and Rust and all these cool things, and or hey, we're going to create a new admin portal, and it needs to be able to call the API, and we're going to write it in React. I'm sorry. I really, really, really hate when roads are designed so you have to get through a lane that is going straight through to get onto a highway, and there's a solid white line that basically blocks them from moving over, and they ignore the white line anyways. That bugs me. It always bugs me every single time I see it. And the thing is, those drivers need to break that lane basically to get over fast enough, because this entrance lane here that's going northbound is backed up like crazy all the time. There's only one lane, whereas southbound has two. That frustrates me. But anyways, back to my original topic. There's a lot of scale that they have to be able to handle, and then swap things out as they need to improve things. And honestly, it inspires me when I get to see not just somebody launched. Microsoft could launch a new social network thing. Whoopity, okay, cool. I'm not saying whoopity-doo. That's great. That's awesome. Maybe Google's going to do Google++, because maybe they've got developers just being itching to use that name. And see, anybody who's a developer, especially an older developer who's written in C and C++, will be like, oh my God, Chris, really? Seriously? Wow. But I don't want to make this a tech channel per se, but I will certainly talk about technical things. That being said, they could launch those things. That would be great. That would be interesting. And I would ask myself, why would I use this? As a user or a consumer of content, as a creator of content, as a business owner, as a marketing company / agency. There's different ways I might use any social network. But then what is the kind of content that goes on that social network? Twitter / X and Bluesky are very text content or textual content. You look at Facebook, and while Facebook is a little bit of a mix of text and picture and video, it's also sort of gated by either friends or groups, pages, whatever you want to call those concepts, that you're interested in, that you've declared an interest in. It's sort of gated a little bit by that. And then you've got TikTok, which is video. It's only video content. If there's text content on there, it's text that's been turned into a video, which I see a lot, or it's pictures / memes that have been turned into a video. But then you get things like Pinterest, which are sort of unique-ish because they're not exactly pictures per se. It's really more URLs as a shareable content. But if you look at these, and again, aside from sort of Facebook, each of them is sort of it does one kind of content. And if you're going to try to shoehorn a different kind of content in there, you still have to make it match that. Why? Because that's how it works. And of course, there's always this, you can follow your friends, you can follow interests that you're interested in. And yes, depending on the network, there may be, and I think there almost always are, these are things you might be interested in. But rarely do they really talk a lot about the engineering behind them. And I get that. The problem is that engineering is a bit of your secret sauce as a company. And you don't want that secret sauce to get out too much. You can lift a little bit of it, But if you let too much of it go, somebody who's bigger than you, or maybe more nimble or agile, or somebody who's smaller than you, actually, I've mixed those together. Somebody who's larger than you and has more resources, or who's smaller than you and therefore more nimble, like a startup, they're both competitors to you. And in the larger ones, you probably know about. The smaller ones will come up on you and you have no idea they exist until suddenly they're close to launch or they're launching, and then they're starting to pull your customers. And so I get that companies don't necessarily want to talk a lot about their engineering, at least until you get to that point where you're basically unchallengeable. Like Netflix. Netflix is effectively unchallengeable, at least in what they do. General paid video distribution, movie distribution. Now, there's things like Nebula and all that are sort of nipping a little bit at their heels, kind of a little bit. I'd say a little bit of them and a little bit of YouTube. And every company, every concept goes through the whole, you're a newborn, you're growing, you're a teenager, you're in full adulthood, you're in middle age, and then, you start to age, and then you're now in decline. And I hate to infer by that somebody who's older is inherently in decline. While certainly there's a certain age at which biologically, yes, your brain is just not going to function as well. And it is what it is. It's something that we all have to face or die young. But nonetheless, companies also follow that same thing. There are certainly companies that escape that, or at least they put it off for so long it doesn't look like they're going to go through it. And there's definitely companies that die young. Make a wrong mistake and they just go bankrupt, or they get swallowed up into a much larger company. Like Broadcom buys you, and then suddenly you're unrecognizable. And everybody's fleeing, and yeah. But that being said, it's interesting to see this Bluesky thing, and I've seen some of a little bit of the engineering details on their app. I've also seen details from people who integrate with them, like in the app, and like, oh look, my server load like crazy overnight. I'm looking at some of these screenshots, and I'm just like, you're doing what with Bluesky, and you've only got so much RAM and only so much memory, and I'm curious what you do. Like, I'm curious, like, are you indexing their posts? And you're doing without little memory, or is it a stream and you're just monitoring for keywords? Are you mirroring? Like, I have no idea what you're doing. But I'm now interested, in what are you doing and what are those possibilities? And yes, I did forward over a link to one of my guys at work, and I said, hey, do we want this? Do one of our customers want this? Is this something that we can value add for our customers? And if not, okay. And if so, okay. Let's get it figured out. My wife actually was on Bluesky. She signed up for it. She hasn't talked about it since. I'm hoping. I don't think there was an NDA. I think it was just she could sign up. She got to be a beta tester, but she never really talked about it or what was on it. But now that I'm on it, the other thing is I'm looking at Bluesky, and I'm like, there's some really cool ideas here. They didn't just say, oh, we're just going to clone Twitter. Okay, cool. I built a Twitter clone for. I built a Twitter clone for a country that used SMS primarily because mobile data wasn't as accessible in that country. I only spec'd it for 40 million messages. It did a lot more than that before. I'm starting to get smoke out of the gears, and I'm monitoring it. And I'm like, hey guys, we're at 10 times our original spec. We're starting to get some smoke out of the gears. I need to put a little bit of maintenance into this, probably change a few things out. They're like, wait, what? What do you mean? Oh, we thought that got shut down. Just shut it down. Just shut it down. The client's long gone. I'm like, oh, you kind of forgot to tell me, so I've been running it this whole time. It's just been sitting there doing its own little thing. Cool. Let me shut that down. No big deal. But that was really cool, actually. And I was like, one of the only people who knows like how long this thing lasted, with minimal, interaction, which was pretty cool, I thought. But I look at how Bluesky works, and it's like, yes, clearly the core concepts have made it from Twitter over to Bluesky, but they've got other concepts. Yes, in Twitter, I can say I want to follow a hashtag, and then there's somewhere that I can follow it. I'm not sure where. I think it's on that left menu in the mobile app at least, but maybe on the desktop web app. But here, it's like it's different tabs. It's just right there. And people, and it's not just like I'm following a hashtag and so therefore I'm going to get this content. No, people essentially declare, from what I can tell, hey, here's a concept. Here's poli-sci news, and it's like a shared follow. Because I can say, yeah, I'm willing to follow that, and then that definition might be one or more tags or people or sources or whatever. And it's almost like a user, but you're not following a user, you're following a query definition. And I'm like, that's a pretty cool idea. Twitter doesn't quite have that. Because somebody's maintaining that. The system is running the imports and the query and all, but somebody's saying, hey, I can tweak how this works, and it tweaks how everybody follows it, which is kind of cool. That's more complex than just a hashtag follow, and it's therefore more flexible as well. So I like that idea. And then also other things like I can actually have a feed, and there are different feeds, that's what they're called, not tabs, feeds. I have a feed of essentially the people who I follow, who they follow, that I don't follow directly. Or I also can have one that's mutuals, so that way the people that I'm mutuals with, I can set essentially dedicated brain bandwidth, visual bandwidth, to what are my mutuals saying, versus just people I'm following but aren't necessarily following me back. Versus the people who the people I'm following are following. Like those kinds of things, I'm like, that's actually kind of cool, because sometimes things can get lost in the noise of just Twitter, because really all there is just for you and following. Okay, the following is my friends or the people who I'm directly following, but I might discover other people off of that, but I can't because Twitter doesn't support that. But Bluesky does, and it sort of solves some of the problem that Mastodon has, which I at one point considered. I was like, I have several Mastodon handles, and every once in a while I'd get in and I'd look. I'm like, these are kind of cool. I like the concept of these sort of niche micro communities. Weirdly enough, I get that really well. My problem is I don't want to have to hunt and peck crazy like all over, and I don't have a way of getting exposure to other people that I might be interested in, because there is no sort of central searchable index of people and their posts, and essentially you could call it almost like a next neighbor type collection of user interests or things that people talk about, where it's like, hey, you appear to like some people in this community, you might like other people also in the same community or in communities that they're connected to too, or not. But there's no way to do that really on Mastodon, unless they happen to be on the same server and use some of the same hashtags, and I happen to find them, and I'm doing all of the work. It would be nice if the system could sort of say, like, hey, these are things you might be interested in. But nonetheless, Bluesky sort of solved that. And in fact, they talk about that a little bit with their why this is not a perfectly federated or P2P network, and it's sort of an amalgamation of that and more traditional networks and things like that. And I was reading through it, and I was like, there's some really cool thought here given to why they made the decisions that they did and how that affected how the whole system sort of built out. And I want to read more of it, definitely. But at its core, it sort of sparks in me this sort of inspiration of sometimes you can get so focused on either the day-to-day or the long-term, these are what we're working towards, how are we making progress towards it, that sometimes it's kind of nice to get inspired and to kind of pull back and say, What am I not even considering? What are some things that I might add to my vision of where I, my team, my department, my company, whatever it is, my industry, what might I add to that maybe I hadn't considered before? Or maybe what is somebody else doing that I'm like, that's a cool idea. I can apply it over here in this way and either potentially solve a problem or at least create new opportunities to solve problems. And so it's kind of that inspiration that I'm drawing right now from Bluesky, is sort of there's a really cool thing that just came out and I want to explore it, and I want to ask myself, like, how does this inspire me to dream different? Which is probably somebody's tagline, and I feel like it was an Apple tagline at one point. But not dream big per se, but just dream different, or just approach an idea differently. And so that, I think, is what I will leave you guys with, is be inspirable, Let yourself sometimes sort of be amazed by what somebody or a group of people do, and then go, that is really cool. I like that. I can't build that, but can I build something that can be inspired by that or by that action? And that, I think, can be pretty darn powerful. You guys have a great day.